Welcome back, guys. Today let's test out Apple's latest processor, the Apple A13. In this video, I'd like to compare the iPhone 11 Pro to the iPhone XS to the iPhone X. This is 3 generations of mostly, I'd say, the same design, just camera differences and processor differences. Let's see how far they've come in that regard. Now, Apple did not upgrade the RAM, still at a paltry 4 gigabytes compared to most of the Android competitors, but the processor is the crown jewel here. Now, I'd like to start with the real-world speed test. We're going to run through these apps consecutively, and I think it applies to most, as you probably use one or more of these applications throughout your day. Just a good way to gauge the speed of a new device. And on the left being the 10, slowest of the bunch, 3 gigabytes of RAM. On the right is the 11 Pro with 4 gigabytes, and the fastest processor, of course, the A13. So I started with some light social media applications, then jumped into a photo editing program with a 10K image, all handled that fairly well. Now the first large game, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which is a fairly heavy app, and the iPhone 11 Pro breezed through it, followed closely by the XS. Then on to the next big game, Asphalt 9. Now, throughout the course of the day while filming this video, I have several observations I'd like to share with you. I was very shocked at how close the XS followed the iPhone 11 Pro. They were neck and neck pretty much. And I suspect that this is because most of the developers have not taken advantage of the extra power that Apple has given them yet with the Apple A13. Most of the optimizations would be coming from Apple's end, and I'm not sure how far they penetrate into the apps. So maybe that's why the iPhone XS is doing so well here. At one point, it even overtook the iPhone 11 Pro, and they were just bouncing back and forth for a little while. The iPhone X, without a doubt, was the slowest of the bunch. Many of the applications just hung on and took a very, very long time. You can tell that this device is finally showing its age. It is now several years old, so it only makes sense. Now, the iPhone 11 Pro did overheat a lot, and that's something I've noticed even with my personal one. In casual use, it heats up. There's even a weird sound coming from the display at one point. It's very strange. And I'm sure with iOS 13.1, things will get a little bit better, but for now, you can tell that the device is in pretty rough shape straight out the door. And this speed test may not be fully indicative of its capabilities. I'll have to redo it at a later time. So at this point, we're getting fairly close to the end of round 1 on both the XS and 11 Pro as it's compiling the 4K video, which is about 1 minute and 30 seconds in length. And lo and behold, it was 1 second behind the iPhone 11 Pro. That blew my mind. And this time around, I loaded up the speed test with plenty of heavy applications, which the XS handled very well. The iPhone 11 Pro, I wouldn't say did it necessarily that much better. So round 2, I noticed that on the iPhone XS, there were a few open applications in the beginning, more than on the iPhone 11 Pro, further backing up my point that it's a non-optimized device and things should improve in the future. I mean, theoretically, it's a stronger device, it has the same amount of RAM. There's no other reason why else, like some of the applications just weren't open on round 2. And that's why the iPhone XS got such a lead here. Some of the apps were open and it was able to gain an advantage on the iPhone 11 Pro. Meanwhile, the iPhone X was left in the dust with a round 1 time of 4 minutes and 23 seconds, which was a bit disappointing because I think it did better in iOS 12. Not to mention, there was one issue that became very apparent, and that's heat. When you're running so many games, so many big games on these iPhones, I noticed that there's a defect where Apple will actually dim the display to about half or a third of its max capacity like the iPhone X is in right now in order to minimize the heat inside. These things cooked up so hot, no kidding, like the device would slow down from the heat. And I think going forward for future iPhones, Apple should definitely implement some sort of thermal management inside like Samsung has, the cooling chambers or whatnot. It's simply not enough as is. Anyways, back to the test. The iPhone XS surprisingly won round 2. It has the same amount of RAM, 4 gigabytes, as the iPhone 11 Pro, yet it had more apps preloaded or still loaded after round 1 in the background, giving it a 30-second advantage over Apple's latest iPhone 11 Pro. This to me is shocking. You'd think your new iPhone would be able to handle application management, RAM management even better than the old one, but it does still have the same amount of RAM. I guess not much changes there. Just a very surprising result. If you have a XS and you're thinking about upgrading to an 11 or 11 Pro just for the performance, don't. There is no difference, I mean, from what I can see at least here. And from the iPhone X to the iPhone 11 Pro, I'd say a pretty wide margin. Like, I would upgrade there. And let's move on to the next round of speed tests. Before we continue, want to cool these off. I do suspect there's some sort of thermal throttling going on as the new iPhone, even in regular use, gets very hot. Now I want to continue with a startup test. All of these are off, all of them on the latest iOS 13 firmware. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, they're off. So this is 3 generations, and then the 4th, we're gonna see that 2020 refresh. They're pretty much a carbon copy of each other unless you turn them over and actually look at the backside. And wow, the iPhone 10 started up first. Would you look at that? And second is the 10s. And wow, considerably later, the iPhone 11 Pro on iOS 13. That's very shocking to see. And with the app switchers cleared, I'm gonna try and launch some apps here. 1, 2, 3, pretty much the same there. And the camera application, so some stock ones first. And this is really hard, but 1, 2, 3, and yeah, just about the same there. App Store here, 1, 2, 3. Pretty close. For system apps, I'd say fairly close here. Asphalt on all. 1, 2, 3. And this one is fairly heavy on all of them. Fortnite by far was the longest loading, and the iPhone 11 Pro suffered heavily with that one for whatever reason. And it appears that this one is loading first, yeah. So in a standalone race, it did load first without anything else really going on in the background. Cool. And YouTube here, 1, 2, 3. 10s was last. Spotify, 1, 2, 3. All pretty much down the line here, 10 being the last one. So in standalone app launching, I wouldn't even say there's that much of a difference whatsoever. It's pretty much the same. You're very unlikely to notice any big difference. It's only the big apps like Fortnite where I really noticed the difference. I've done some Safari testing. All the websites that I tried to show you, comparison between, they all load at the exact same time. Really almost no difference once you're at this level of performance in a smartphone, and the browser scores are all the same. So a lot closer than you think. Like, do not upgrade to the new iPhone just from performance alone. Like, even the iPhone 10 is not bad. It's well optimized. With time, Apple has polished it fairly well. There is no reason to be here for performance alone. Like, you have more than enough already. Now, let's jump into Geekbench and see what we can get here with an actual benchmark. This is where you usually see all the differences, is only in the numbers. Usability, as I've shown you, the iPhone 11 Pro may even be a downgrade from the 10s at first. With time, of course, the app developers, everything, they'll update the apps, it'll get better. But for now, I just don't see a reason to upgrade for performance. Okay, and there are those scores. The iPhone 10 seems to suffer from this problem a lot, where when it overheats, the screen dims, some sort of throttling is going on. Having that a lot here. Now, as you can see, steady evolution. This is using the new Geekbench 5 Pro metrics. It's a little bit different, but fairly in line with what you're gonna see on most of these devices, both multi and single. Now, in the benchmarks, yes, it's impressive. I'm not seeing this performance being reflected in the OS just yet. The animations, if anything, on the iPhone 11 Pro are even buggier, especially when you're trying to move apps. I noticed the stutter. Did you see that? When you grab it, system animations are not very smooth here. It's a slow stutter. I don't understand why. So the polish certainly is not there yet. And while it's running the Antutu test, just want to see hottest point on the phones. So we got 97 degrees on the 11 Pro, 99 on the 10s Max, 101, so running a little bit hotter, and the iPhone 10, 104 degrees. Definitely struggling the most here. So I think all could do better. Oh, 11 Pro is actually at 102, 102-ish. The Antutu results are much more promising on the 11 Pro, a bigger difference than I thought. Memory, though, lacking on all of them. Apple dropped the ball on this one. 6 gigabytes of RAM would have justified the Pro naming, but 4 in 2019 I simply think is not enough, as this video has proven. Last thing I wanted to do is test the Wi-Fi 6 capability. I do have a Wi-Fi 6 router, and we'll be seeing the LTE performance, which should be about 15% better. Solid performance all around. Now, using my 11 Pro in just the last day around my house, where usually I have some spotty signal spots, it's been great. Like, Wi-Fi 6, I can tell, permeates the walls better, and I'm just generally happy with the service. So one more on cellular. So I live in a dead zone with Verizon, and my 10s, understandably with its really bad Intel modem, got the worst speed. The iPhone 10 was faster than my 11 Pro, but the tests would yield different results from time to time, so I wouldn't call this anywhere near conclusive. Let's check out this multi-angle Face ID, see if it's actually there. Wouldn't say from that one. 1, 2, 3. It unlocks just about in the same angle as the iPhone 10s here. Once again, from the side a little bit. Okay, maybe a little. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's anything special. In what angle were they talking about? Okay, right there, but the XS did it too. And once again, so I'll be looking at the Pro, unlocked, XS from the same angle unlocks. Wouldn't say there's anything special about the angle. It's exactly the same for me. XS on the left, 11 Pro on the right, Face ID, 1, 2, 3. Not any faster. I say that the speed improvements they were talking about just adhered to iOS 13 as a whole, because that does improve it on all Face ID devices. Otherwise, between the XS and the 11 Pro, I'm not seeing a difference. Let's see between the 10. 1, 2, 3. Maybe a little bit faster on the animation scale. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Okay, pretty close there. It's not that much faster, just a little bit, but then again, that does add up over time. 2, 3. So yeah, the animation is a little bit faster here on the 11 Pro. Otherwise, both are fairly good. And that concludes my speed test. I'm shocked that the iPhone 11 Pro is not that much faster in most areas versus the XS or even the iPhone 10. I mean, surprisingly, such a small amount of difference. So, hope you learned a thing or two. Peace.